All right, so here we go. We are talking about programmatic symphonies. Again, if you remember from one of the prior videos, a programmatic symphony is a work for a symphony that has an extra musical idea, usually some sort of text or story or painting, as we'll see in one of the programmatic works by a Russian composer here shortly. The first video is on Hector Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique. The first thing to notice about this Romantic era work is that it does not have a number. If you remember from last listening test or the one tonight, you have Beethoven Symphony number 5, Mozart Symphony number 40, Haydn Symphony such and such, and it was called Surprise Symphony, but Haydn didn't actually call it that. That was a after the fact title. So Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique, keeping with the Romantic tradition of taking poetic titles and adding them to works, does not name his symphony a number. He names it a title. And keeping with the tradition of not following the tradition of the symphonic tradition of the classical era, it is in 5 movements instead of 4. So this particular work is based on a dream state, a series of dreams that come about by Berlioz's legendary attempt, true or not, we're not quite sure, probably true, of trying to commit suicide by taking too much opium. And instead of overdosing, he takes just enough to be put into a deep dreamlike state. In these 5 movements, what happens is that it recounts the dreams that occur from this opium state. More importantly, they're tied to this woman named Harriet Smithson, who's a famous Shakespearean actress that Hector Berlioz has the hots for. He keeps attending the performances. He's not a very good-looking man. He sits in the back. At every performance, he kind of gets closer and closer. Eventually, he introduces himself to her, and she's not too smitten with him. But over kind of this obsessive nature that he has, eventually Harriet does actually marry him. But more importantly is his use of her as a melody. So in the 5 movements of Symphonie Fantastique, Berlioz uses this concept that he calls the idée fixe, or the fixed idea, which was a common medical term. And he was actually studying medicine before he became a musician. His dad was a medical doctor. And what he does in this fixed idea is that throughout each of the 5 movements in his dream state, instead of seeing Harriet, his love, he sees her as a sound. And this melody represents her through each of the movements. Now, they go through various guises, various rhythmic transformations, but in each of the 5 movements, Harriet's there, not as a person, but as a sound. Okay, again, people are doing a lot of opium at this time. This is a recurring idea called the idée fixe. So we listened to movement 5 of the Symphonie Fantastique for our listening test. And again, this is meant to supplement the reading, not to replace it. And in in movement 5 of Symphonie Fantastique, the program is as such. It's a dream of a witch's Sabbath. Hector finds himself at a witch's Sabbath. He hears unearthly sounds, groans, and shrieks of laughter, distant cries echoed by other cries. The beloved's melody is heard, but it's lost its character of nobility and timidity. It is she who comes to the Sabbath. At her arrival, a roar of joy. She joins in a devilish orgy, and then a funeral knell and a burlesque of the Dies Irae. So let's stop there for a second. So the Dies Irae is the chant tune that the Catholics use for the death mass. This death mass is called the Requiem. And everybody at this time would have known the tune, the Dies Irae. Today, most educated musicians who study classical music would easily recognize the Dies Irae. And what he does in this Dies Irae is as it puts it, kind of a burlesque is, of course, a dance type. And so he takes this death tune and he morphs it. He puts it in the tubas, it speeds up. It's played in church bells, showing the funeral of his love, the funeral of the idea of what she once was, this beautiful melody. Now he sees her in a witch's Sabbath, in an unearthly way, in a devilish orgy. And so this melody is going through this transformation, and then you hear church bells, these funeral bells being knelled, and then you have this odd dance and morphing of the Catholic Dies Irae, almost in a blasphemous way, really. So this is a very, very audacious movement. You'll hear lots of sound effects. The flutes actually bend pitches here. There's a moment where you can hear bones being dragged, where the strings players turn their bows upside down. Instead of bowing the strings with the hair, they use the wood. It's called con legno, and that's when they play the strings with the wood of the bow. And you can actually hear the rattling of the bones in movement 5. You're also going to hear a fugue. So again, fugue hasn't gone away. Composers are still using polyphony. They're just using it to more of their own advantage. Then you're going to hear a dance, and then the dies irae comes in and out. It mixes with the love's melody or the fixed idea. Okay. So again, what you'll see as a romantic feature here is grandiose in scope and scale, 5 movements, very long. It's a programmatic symphony for lots of instruments. It's a large orchestra. It adds more color. They don't necessarily use all the instruments at one time, but you've got more colors in your crayon box here. There's a blur between the line of music and literature, theater, and autobiography. It's cyclic, and it's unified by this fixed idea. It's a fascination with the macabre and the supernatural, which of course is one of the ideas of Romantic literature, German Romantic literature. And then you have new orchestral colors, expressive effects, and new techniques of the instruments to add to that extra musical idea called the program.